Hey everyone, and welcome to the Payoff Pitch. I'm Chris Steele, joined by James Vecchio. And this week we're going to run down just some of the first half of the MLB season, what we've seen, what we're excited about, what went right, what went wrong. And there's a lot of things that have gone wrong in the fantasy world, James, the biggest of which I think is Ronald Acuna having his knee blowout. In a surprising turn of events, it wasn't the Marlins absolutely pounding him with pitches that injured him. It was just his knee going out on him. The thing that I'm thinking about right now is what has this done to his value? Is he going to be changing dramatically? If you have him on your team, you're a contender. Are you looking to flip him for somebody, or what are you doing right now?
Honestly, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. It's something to just kind of sit, hold, and wait on. I know we're halfway through the season, so it's kind of like, hey, we're halfway through the season. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to be able to flip him for anything that you're going to really get substance for in return. And you've made your bed here. If you've got a player, it doesn't matter who it is, who's semi-hurt right now, no one's going to be buying on the other end at a nice price. Everyone's going to be going, well, he's hurt. Yeah, maybe if you're in a dynasty, you can get someone who's got, long-term value and you can flip him to a rebuilder. But also, it's not that many teams out there that rebuild in fantasy baseball halfway through the season. You're going to wait until the very end of the season. You're going to hold all your cards and then sell. So, long story short, I think you're just stuck with what you got. And if you have an injury, well, that's what you got.
Pete Alonso is home run derby champion again. Is this going to end up being one of those things that is the highlight of his career, or is there more to Pete Alonso than just being a guy who can win a home run derby?
I think there's more. I don't think he's this 53 homer power guy like we saw his rookie year, but we all know the ball was juiced then, and everyone was hitting homers at insane rates. He's a 40 homer guy who's going to have a very, very nice fantasy career, who probably won't do much defensively, which doesn't matter, isn't going to obviously get any kind of steals, which doesn't matter from first base, is going to get you your RBIs and your runs at a totally acceptable rate and hit those dingers. From a fantasy perspective, I see a lot of comparison to Ryan Howard, someone who's going to have a very nice peak and some very strong years, but overall will decline and kind of be meh before he falls off and is largely forgettable 10 years from now. I don't think that that's a knock on Pete Alonso. I just don't think he's a superstar, but he's won 2 home run derbies. Maybe that will be his everlasting national memory, or maybe it'll be a few Mets playoff wins. I'm not sure, but what I am sure about is I just pulled off a trade to get him in a redraft league, and I'm very excited about that. So
Nice.
Go Pete Alonso. I'd love to see him continue his power surge, bring it all the way after the All-Star game in the home run derby, and just become an absolute star. And the whole post-second half home run derby slump. It's not really a slump. It's just usually the guys in the home run derby led the league in homers in the first half, and usually the guys who lead the league in the homers in the first half just don't do it in the second.
And it seemed like after that first season where Pete Alonso has his arrival and just breaks out as a rookie, does things that nobody else has ever really done before, that last year he was definitely pressing. He didn't look like himself. He was trying to win every game with one swing, and it just hasn't been himself. This year, he kind of seems like he's more back on track towards being the player that he was in the previous year. The power numbers haven't quite been what people have expected. Do we just expect too much of Pete Alonso at this point?
I mean, if you look at his numbers this year and compare him to last year, he's played about 20 more games. He's had another 70 or so plate appearances. He's got 1 extra homer. He's hitting a little better. He's hitting 250 to 231, but his on-base percentage is a difference of 2 points. His slugging percentage is a difference of 12 points. Last year's Pete Alonso is also this year's Pete Alonso, and I think this kind of is who he is. He's going to be a guy who's going to get you north of 800 OPS. He's going to hit for strong power, but not insane, elite, ungodly power. And he's going to give you that power production. Maybe a right-handed Matt Olson's a good comparable comparison. I know right now Matt Olson's hitting the cover off the ball, but once he hits 100 for a month, which is going to happen at some point, he's not going to be that, and their end-of-season lines are going to look about the same. So I like Pete Alonso. I think he's very good, and in dynasty formats, first base is pretty dang weak right now. So he's up there just kind of by default as opposed to just overall greatness. But you can do a lot worse than a guy who hits 250 and mashes homers in today's baseball, because 250 is like very good out of a first baseman today.
Yeah.
So I'll take it.
And it seems like he's the expectation of what people believe Joey Gallo was going to be. And then Joey Gallo has consistently outperformed what people expected him to be. It seems like Pete Alonso's kind of falling into the format of what people thought Joey Gallo was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison as well. He's a guy who's going to hit for power, be fine in the average department, get on base pretty solidly, and that's just not a superstar. That's just a solid player, one of the better players on the team, a 3-4-5 hole hitter, but he's not someone who's just an absolute star, and that's okay. And I think Joey Gallo falls in that same category. Is Joey Gallo the best hitter on the Rangers offense? I think so. Is he the best hitter in baseball? No. And that's very okay. With a lot of guys who have a lot of hype, like Joey Gallo, like Pete Alonso, they had a lot of hype. They don't meet the hype, but that doesn't mean they're not a great baseball player. They're just not Ronald Acuna. Well, a lot of people aren't him, so it's okay.
Right. And one of the things that I'm continuing to be struck by is Kyle Schwarber. Just on fire all of last month. He continues to just knock the ball out of the park. We talked a couple weeks ago about his comparison when he was with the Cubs was they thought he could be Babe effing Ruth. But right now, if Kyle Schwarber can be half of what he was last month for the rest of the season, that's a really valuable player.
Yeah, it totally is, but my expectation is he will not be half of that. He will be less than half. He got hurt. He should be coming back relatively soon. It shouldn't be an injury that's anyone's going to go, oh, no, he's done for the year. But it's also something where there are a little question marks. And frankly, if you got that hot Kyle Schwarber month, congratulations, you hit the gold. But you should not be expecting him to end the year with 38 homers after he comes back from the IL. It's just unlikely to happen. He is the guy we all thought he was. He's not the guy who showed up last month. He had an extremely hot month. That's going to be the greatest month of his career. He had one of the greatest months home run hitting wise ever in the history of baseball. I'm not going to project anywhere close to that going forward from a guy who we've seen a lot out of in his career, and a lot of that time that he's played, he's been fine power-wise. He's got some power. He's good, but he's not upper echelon, let alone at the top of the top. I don't think something magically changed. I don't think this is a Jose Bautista rags to riches story or Edwin Encarnacion. I think it's a hot month. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone else can profit off of me, but I'm fine with not being the one who buys into that.
I think that in similar situation to Schwarber, I kind of got taken at the beginning of the year because I looked at what Max Muncy did during 2020 and believed that it was only a matter of time before he turned back into a pumpkin. I thought Max Muncy had just kind of overperformed what he was over the last few years. And then this year, he's been one of the best players in the league, which just blows my mind because it seemed like he was always going to be good enough, but it didn't seem like he was going to be this elite player that he's been this year. Is Muncy just overperforming, or did I get that evaluation completely wrong?
I'm going to hurt your ego and say you got it completely wrong. He is everything that Justin Turner is. He's a guy who is just a guy somewhere else, shows up in LA, becomes an on-base machine, and also a very good baseball player outside of those on-base skills. I don't know what it is. I don't know why he suddenly learned how to hit in LA when he was in Northern California. He was an absolute piece of trash. I'm not sure what they've done, but not only can he hit, he can walk, he can get on base. He's just going to be extremely solid. His fantasy transition, just like Justin Turner, isn't as much as what his real-world value is because of those on-base skills, and no one really cares about that in fantasy. Yeah, it might net you a few extra runs here or there, but by and large, you'd much rather have a single over a walk. But regardless, Max Muncy can rake. He also plays all across the infield and holds that eligibility year after year, which is extremely valuable in today's type of fantasy environment. And yeah, really, I think you missed that one, but it's okay. I said that JD Martinez was absolutely cooked and done, and whoops, that was very wrong. It happens.
And it wasn't that I was really down on Muncy. It's just the fact that last year he was so below 200. And I know it was just a short period of time, but it felt like this was more of a trend than it was anything. But to see him bounce back the way he has this year, he's been incredible. And you're right, always on base. And that's incredibly valuable for his team over on. That's going to get you runs. That's going to get you a lot more than just the power numbers we're talking about with Pete Alonso.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Muncy's just a kind of the perfect real world baseball player. Obviously you'll take a Trout over him or you'll take an Cunha, but what are his flaws? He hits for not an amazing average, just a very solid and strong average. His speed is mediocre. Like, these are strong nitpicks. Is his average skill and his speed that much worse than Mike Trout? If we just want to throw that comparison out, yes, it's worse. I'm not saying it's equal, but is it that much worse that there's a huge difference in those two categories? Because everywhere else, he's about Trout's equal. It's a huge statement, but if he holds the way he's held this year, and I think he can more or less maintain that for a while and have that Justin Turner juju, I think he's just an elite real world player. In fantasy, he's very good, but outside of fantasy, he's top notch.
Yeah. One other player that I think is kind of being overshadowed right now that is a first baseman that I think doesn't get the credit they deserve. And it's because Shohei Ohtani's been such a whirlwind this year. He can do anything. But Jared Walsh has been outstanding for the Angels this year in a season where everything seems to have gone wrong. They got him right, and he continues to be one of the best players in the league. Going into this year, I didn't feel like I knew too much about him, and it felt like a guy who was just filling in a spot. But he could be somebody who could be a pillar for a team for a long time.
Completely agree with you. And to go the opposite direction of my JD Martinez take, I was all over Jared Walsh. I didn't understand why he was getting drafted where he was. He finished off last season strong. He had all the ties in the world to this team, and Albert Pujols wasn't going to be the guy who took playing time from him. I just thought he was being massively underdrafted everywhere. And boy, did I turn out to be correct. Did I think that Jared Walsh was going to go on to be a guy who's on pace for 40 dingers and hitting 280 or whatever it is? No, I didn't think that. I'll admit that. I didn't see a massive breakout coming, but I thought he was going to provide full season value. I thought he was going to be a very nice piece who can round out your roster very cheaply. And I'm all in on him being a guy going forward. I think next year and the year after that, and the year after that, and probably even the year after that, Jared Walsh is going to be a mainstay on a fantasy roster. Is he, again, going to turn the world on fire and be the number 3 first baseman like he's been this year? No, this is probably a career season for him, but he's only going to fall off a little bit. I would be all about buying him in a dynasty league. I'm fine with buying him in a redraft right now. I think way too many people look at a guy like Jared Walsh and say, oh, hot first half, and I look at him and go, hot first few years.
Yeah. And while we're talking about good values, Good Value is one of our sponsors for tonight, Yard Barbers. Hate spending those long summer days doing yard work? We have just the solution, Yard Barbers LLC. Yard Barbers LLC is a local full-service lawn care company looking to provide the Quad Cities with a quality and affordable outdoor service. Don't wait and fall to the back of the line. Contact Yard Barbers right now for a free yard evaluation and estimate. Find Yard Barbers on Facebook at Yard Barbers LLC or send them an email at yardbarbersqc@gmail.com. And as long as we're talking about guys who are a little bit of a value and we may have missed on or that we got right, one player that I don't have any faith in whatsoever, and the numbers completely contradict me here, is Adam Frazier on the Pirates. And it may just be my Pirates blinders go on, and I just believe that they're going to get everything wrong they can possibly get wrong. But Adam Frazier's put up great numbers this year, and I still don't feel like I would go all in on him.
Yeah, you're using the term great kind of loosely. The guy has 4 homers and 5 steals. Yeah, those are not great numbers. I guess 5 steals is fine out of your second baseman, but you're not thinking that's great. The 4 homers hurts, but also you can find power, so it's good. Obviously, his 330 batting average is otherworldly. He's got 53 runs, which is near the top of second baseman, but he's not, crushing it by any means. And his 29 RBIs are absolute junk. So you've got kind of a 2-category pony. He's like a guy who only hits for power and drives in runs, except he does it with 2 different categories. I agree with you that I'm not buying Adam Frazier as this guy who suddenly is the next Tony Gwynn batting title person. I might buy that he holds it up the rest of this year, maybe if he doesn't get traded. But if he moves at the deadline, I don't like him to continue what he was doing. I'm kind of staying away. Really, a lot of those middle infielders who've stepped up and had great first halves, I'm backing away from. I don't really want to touch them. And I want to go to the guys who I think are their equals, who had a bad first half, and I just want to own those guys. I've got somebody on Twitter who always is asking me for my takes, and I always return them. And he was saying, should he move Gavin Lux for Brandon Crawford in a redraft? And I said I'd rather have Lux. And he was very perplexed by that, but my rationale is simple. Brandon Crawford isn't this guy. He's not this guy who just suddenly showed up and is an elite power hitter. He's been great, and maybe he'll continue to be great, but I'm not buying it. Gavin Lux is tied to the best offense in baseball. He's going to have playing time, and he's going to have a hot streak eventually. He has that type of talent. Is he going to do it this year? Maybe not. But I'd rather buy the future of Gavin Lux than the future of Brandon Crawford, even in a redraft. If you look at their season stats, the answer is Brandon Crawford, no question. But you have to think about that moving forward. To reference my Pete Alonso trade, I'm acquiring him and Castellanos, and I'm moving Garrett Cole. And I am just absolutely thrilled with that move because I don't like what Garrett Cole's future is. He doesn't have the sticky stuff. Yeah, he just burned Houston to the ground. And yeah, he's still going to be a great pitcher. Don't get me wrong. But looking forward, I'm not projecting his first half to be his second half. And that's kind of what you do with the All-Star break. You look at players and you go, wow, that guy really stunk. Do I think he actually stinks? In the case of a guy like Anthony Rizzo, maybe I say yes. But in the case of some other guys, I say no. You want to look forward, not behind. Those full season stats can't get added to your roster. You got to get the guys who are going to get future stats. Always keep that in mind.
Yeah, in one of my leagues, Gavin Lux has got the title, the untradeable Gavin Lux, because several people took a run at him, and this person said repeatedly that they could have him in 7 years, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, but whatever. If Gavin Lux is this untradeable piece, go ahead and do that if you want to do that.
Yeah, by no means is he untradeable, but I like him, and, frankly, I'm all about any ties to Los Angeles. Right now, I'd be buying low on Edwin Rios. I don't even know when he's projected to return, but if I can get a piece of him in a dynasty league, give it to me. Even if he gets traded and I miss out on it, I just want to be close to Los Angeles. Anything that's there is good. When was the last time someone went to LA and just didn't perform fantasy-wise? Didn't meet their expectations? I can't think of it. Anyone. A middle reliever, the 5th starter. No one really fails in LA. Everyone at least gets to their expectation. So I'm all about buying until they prove me otherwise.
David Price, but I mean, he's never been healthy for more than a week. So I think that kind of holds him back a little bit.
Yeah, I guess, that's one. I didn't give the injury caveat, so that totally holds up. But he was on the bad side of the age curve, and everyone was going, But if he was in the rotation this year, it would have been great. You could maybe say Dustin May for the same reason, injuries, but not because of on-field performance.
Yeah, no. Even coming back from this injury, you expect Dustin May to be a guy who has electric stuff. If it holds up past this injury, that's going to be remaining to be seen. But if he can be the guy that everybody thinks he is, it's still a fantasy impact for sure.
Definitely, and it's again, if you're thinking forward, and I'm hopping back and forth between redraft and dynasty, so I know my takes are a little hard to handle and might be a little convoluted. But a guy like Dustin May, why would you not want to have that on your roster? Because the only thing that can happen that's bad is he gets moved to the bullpen and becomes a great late inning guy, and Kenley Jansen's not getting any younger. I just feel like if you're tied to an elite team and you might get playing time on that elite team, you're going to perform. We all remember when Austin Barnes just had like a 410 on base percentage out of nowhere just because he played. They decided he had to get pitched to, and then they just walked around him. Like, there's so much value in being next to great players in lineups, and I think fantasy players kind of don't realize that enough, especially with those elite teams.
And we kind of talked about those slappy second basemen, the Adam Frazier type. David Fletcher has been on fire like the last couple of weeks. And he's another one that I don't really buy that much, but I like where he's at in the lineup since he's moved from the bottom to the top. And now he has, Shohei Ohtani behind him and a couple other guys, depending on the week if Rendon feels like he's up to playing or not.
Yeah, and like you said, it's hard to buy these slappy second basemen because there's kind of a lot of them. There's Adam Frazier, who's doing extremely well, just like David Fletcher. There's a guy like Tommy Edman, who has a little bit of speed, but he's the same thing, and, he might not necessarily qualify at second base for very long, but right now he's got that eligibility. Then you've got a guy like Dylan Moore, who's on the other side, who had a great 2020 and has just been absolutely atrocious this year. But that's kind of what you get with those guys. Sometimes they slap it well, and sometimes they don't. I was all in on Luis Ariz this year. I thought him and the Twins were just going to be a match made in heaven. He was going to be up there just basically being Adam Frazier, hitting 330 with no pop, no speed, scoring some runs, and doing fine in RBIs. And he's kind of done that when he's been on the field. He hasn't been bad by any means. But I just rattled off 6 off the top of my head, and I'm sure there are more. The slappy second baseman exists. It's very much a guy today. And if you want to go and pay for Adam Frazier instead of waiting and just going getting a Luis Ariz, you're playing the game wrong. You're buying last year's stats or first half stats and not buying second half stats. There's a lot of guys who are just holds by default. No one should be trading for Adam Frazier because it's Adam Frazier. And if you have him on your roster, you can hold him. Same thing with David Fletcher. It's David Fletcher. The guy's got 2 homers and 4 steals. He's not a guy who you can invest in when he's only hitting 250. He's absolutely atrocious. Right now he's on fire, but he's not just going to stay on fire until the end of the year. That's not going to happen. So when that flame burns out, you don't want him, and the flame's been going for a while. It's going to burn out soon, so I stay away.
One weird thing about that, though, is that if either of these guys that we're talking about, like with Fletcher or Frazier, if their name was Nick Madrigal and they had the kind of fantasy prospect like hung around them, like that medal around their neck, people would be falling all over themselves to try to get this guy. Is it just because Madrigal is young and he has so much upside to him? But even if Madrigal maxes out on what he can be, he's probably a David Fletcher or an Adam Frazier for this year.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. You said he has a lot of upside, and that's not true. He just has a lot of young. He's got young. There's future, and with future comes the unknown. And people also think in this regard, they see young and they go, oh, he will get better as he ages, as opposed to middle-aged or old, where they say, oh, he will decline. It's a large generalizing term, but it's also true. They look at Madrigal, they say he's young, and they go, if he could add some power, he'd be amazing. But the reality is he's not going to add power. He's going to keep being an empty 300 hitter. That's good. That's not like a bad fantasy asset. But why would I pay for that when I could get an empty 300 hitter in Luis Ariz or Adam Frazier or David Fletcher for so much cheaper? Yeah, I can get an extra 3 years in a dynasty out of Madrigal, but is that really that valuable based on the cost difference? It's a classic symptom of youth clouds the mind. Youth is this unknown that only can get better, And I've been watching baseball for a long time. Youth does not only get better. It sometimes maintains, it sometimes gets worse, and it's not nearly as good as you think. There are plenty of people whose best years is their rookie year, and that's it. And the love of a guy like Nick Madrigal, who's got this prospect status when he just kind of doesn't deserve it. I mean, maybe that's too harsh. Maybe as a second baseman, he's one of the best second baseman prospects because all the great prospects are at short and then they get moved to second base.
Right.
But it's perplexing to me to see him get all that love. I know Nico Horner had the same style of love being tied to Chicago's offense last year and the year before. And it's just kind of like, these are guys who, if everything goes well, are going to score some runs and hit 300. What if that doesn't happen? They're useless. It's not my cup of tea to go and try and grab the next superstar who no one projected to have power and suddenly does. It's my cup of tea to just go get the guy who already is good.
That's why I feel burned a little bit, because I went in on Keston Hiura and got burned because he ends up moving to first base. He's not a player who has enough power to be a first baseman. So now I'm burned there. And if he goes back to second base, he's really burned out, and it's just everything's broken. It's all wrong. None of it's right. The Brewers screwed him up as badly as they possibly could. And it just, when you try to get that guy who does have power, it works out even worse for you sometimes.
Yeah, you're completely right in your story. I will defend the Brewers somewhat on Keston Hiura in that his defensive metrics were absolutely horrendous his rookie year. He had one of the worst defensive second baseman seasons in the past 2 decades. Yeah. He was very bad. So his transition to first made some sense, even though his offensive profile doesn't really make any sense. And that's why I was getting out from underneath him, even after his otherworldly rookie year, because I saw that writing on the wall. I saw that once he moves to first base, even if he put up his rookie year numbers, he's just a very solid first baseman. Right. And, people who are kind of paying deep attention might notice those things. Not to say you're not, but I don't know about Hiura. He's a guy who gets burned, and really, that's what happens with young people. Most people get burned by young guys because they don't turn into the next Acuna and Trout. I kind of feel like I'm harping on a dead drum today, but how many Acunas and Trouts are there all the time? There's Tatis Jr., there's, Bo Bichette. Like, there are good players, but there aren't these guys that just become superstars because they were top prospects. They're guys who become baseball players. They don't become absolute studs, because if everyone's an absolute stud, no one's an absolute stud. Right. Look at Alex Kirilloff. I was super high on him. Look at Andrew Vaughn. I was super high on him. I thought both those guys were going to be at the top end of this rookie class, and instead they're both very fine. Maybe next year they take a leap. Maybe next year they don't. But the reality is the expectation that these guys are going to be stars is really hard to set. We both thought that Andrew Vaughn was going to be that superstar because he was tied to Chicago, and maybe he does once we have Jimenez back and we have Robert back. But right now it's not, and he can't do it on his own because he's not that good. And you have to remember that in fantasy. These young guys are not that good. They're just not. The odds are they will not be that good. So if you can sell them for someone who is that good, who's got youth blinders in their eyes, then sell.
Right. And the thing is that I think with Keston, the Brewers knew how bad he was going to be at second base. That was what I was kind of factoring into that whole equation, was they kind of know what they're getting here, and they had Travis Shaw play second base, so it can't get that bad in comparison. But at the same time, he's looking like maybe he has to end up in left field at some point here.
Yeah, a Ryan Braun type career path could be the greatest option for him as an awful defensive infielder, moves to the outfield, finds a home as an adequate to maybe slightly above average outfielder. But realistically, I don't think Hiura's anything more than a guy. I think I've probably said that all season. He's a guy. He's not bad. He's not going to be just out of baseball or something. But I see a lot of comparisons between him and a guy like Miguel Andujar. They can hit pretty well, but they're so bad at defense, and their offensive numbers are not good enough to be a pure standalone DH. And in today's baseball environment where defense and flexibility matters, they're just pretty damn limited.
Yeah. And one guy that I kind of pegged as maybe if you're not going to be able to get Acuna, try to find the next Acuna. The guy I kind of pegged as maybe having the potential to be the next Acuna was Joe Adell. And Joe Adell flamed out in an incredible way because he does have a huge hole in his swing. And he's kind of in a position right now where I would be looking to add him because he's probably one of the hottest players in AAA right now. Everybody's forgotten about him. Every player on the Los Angeles Angels is headed towards the darkness. If you're an outfielder, you just cannot get healthy. It's immediately you're going to fall into the black hole and never be seen again. So there's reason to think Joe Adell might be a good ad right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one as well. Byron Buxton finally stepped up and was a superstar this year after, 5 years of people projecting him to be. And Joe Adell's got one bad rookie year as, I think, a teenager. And we've got a lot of time for Joe Adell to still have that post hype. And I think he's going to hit and be fine. My preseason thought process with those Angels where we were going to see a Trout, Adell, Marsh outfield with Walsh at first. And it was going to be nice. I thought Justin Upton was going to get DFA'd and everything was going to be fine. Instead, he just went to the DL. So I'm okay with that. And yeah, I think Adell is going to become a guy. I don't think he's going to become an elite guy by any means. I don't think his number one otherworldly status is anything he'll hit on. But a player who can, sock 20 bombs and steal 20 bases and hit for a decent average, yeah, I'll take that today. That's not as, rare as it, or not as common as it once was. It is pretty rare. So give me Joe Adell. Keep him on your radar. Post hype is the best hype because you get it cheap. And if you fail, it's fine. And if you don't fail, you've got a great return.
Well, and looking at the Angels outfield as well, one of the early shows that we did together, you said you were completely off on it was Adam Eaton. Don't touch him with a 10-foot pole, got DFA'd. So right on that one. And now he's hanging out on the Angels because they're just looking for a body they can throw out there.
Yeah, I said it then, and I guess I'll say it again. Adam Eaton is towards the end of his career. He's had a solid career, but when you go back and think about it, I think he's been more of a disappointment than he has been a success story on his overall career arc. And that kind of rings true with this year. No one thought when he went over to Chicago he was going to become this great number 2 hole hitter who's going to have some surprise pop, great speed, and amazing on base skills. They thought he was going to be adequate, and they thought he was going to be solid. And I said, nah, I don't really buy that because he hasn't been that adequate or solid really at all since his few years in Washington. And, you're buying kind of a guy who can't hit for power anymore and doesn't have any speed. So you need good average and runs at the top of the order, and I just didn't think he'd sit there. I didn't even project all the injuries, and he still got DFA'd, and he's on his last legs. He'll have his cup of coffee in LA, get DFA'd when they start to get mildly healthy, maybe go somewhere else, and then he's done. And while it's mildly sad, that's also the life of a baseball player. It's how they all end, and Adam Eaton's end career game is going to be no different from a lot of other people.
It's not all that sad when you hear the stories about how much of a bag he is. So, and I'm okay with him having a terrible end.
But yeah, all of the stories of him just not being the greatest guy makes it easy to say that. But also, I haven't seen anything come out firm on it, so I keep my mouth shut.
He's had his own little comments that kind of tell you that those stories seem very likely to be true.
Yeah.
We both were in on Andrew Vaughn. You were talking about him a little bit earlier. I think he's really started to show up the last few weeks. So is this kind of just the progression of a young hitter just starting to kind of adapt and make his way in the major leagues? Or is there reason to think that he's kind of had the light switch get flicked here?
I see it as he's a young hitter who's just finding his way through the league. The league made some adjustments. They were kind of crushing him to start his career. He's figured it out. He's starting to come back, and the league is going to now readjust, and so we're going to see what happens then. This is an age-old game that happens all the time, And with players who are not of elite caliber, like those Acuñas and Trouts, you get to see ebbs and flows. And it looks like that's what we're going to see with Andrew Vaughn. As far as rest of season value, I see him as a fringe, fine outfielder who, when he's hot, what's going on, and when he's cold, you're going to want to cut him. And that's kind of what he is. Kind of similar to Ron Castle, another guy high on, who's not atrocious, not bad. These glimmers where he has where you go put it together hasn't yet. The keyword in that is yet, because I think will happen. But in 2021, I'm gonna vote it and losses and just try and what this hand is. Searching for my third or my utility player. I'm not really even kind of giving a rest of season value. I'm carrying top now, Roddy, when that body go grab the neck. That's my mantra for my backhanders. And then maybe Andrew Vaughn doesn't get it, and I can just sit. But my expectation that will happen.
Yeah. And getting back to the Angels, you're talking about Trout, we were talking about Adam Eaton and how that outfield's completely beat up. Why are they bad? I look at some of the pieces they put together, and it's like there shouldn't be a reason other than, injuries have taken their toll, and the only meaningful thing Dylan Bundy has contributed this year is vomiting on the mound. But why is this team bad?
I mean, they're bad because their starting pitching is atrocious. It's awful. And as much as we love offense, as much as we are noticing how important bullpens are, the reality is you need your starting pitchers to be good. They can't be bad. The worst your starting pitchers can really be are Blake Snell levels, where you're like, okay, you get 2 times through the order and that's it. You can't ever see a guy a third time. You can take that if they're actually pitching like Blake Snell the first 2 times. But when you got guys like Griffin Canning, Alex Cobb, Dylan Bundy, Andrew Haney, Patrick Sandoval as your main 5, and you've got Reclamation Project Jose Quintana as your hopeful greatness, yeah, you stink. The reason Ohtani's pitching so much is because he's their best starter in addition to being their best hitter when Trout's out. Like, that's why he's pitching. They don't have any pitching. The idea that Dylan Bundy was a good post-hype candidate and somebody who's going to put up what he did in 2020, I sold on that as well. I saw Dylan Bundy pitch a lot. He was not very good until last year. Maybe he would have held up, but the puking on the mound Dylan Bundy, who's puking up home runs, that's the guy I've kind of come to expect. Mm-hmm. And this team just can't pitch, and starting pitching matters more. If you have elite starting pitching, you can find a way to get some runs. We've seen plenty of teams go and win World Series where their offense is but they've got that pitching. If you've got an offense that isn't but you've got bad pitching, you can't even make the playoffs in the expanded playoff world. Mm-hmm. It's the truth. You need to have guys who keep you in games. Look at the Mets. They don't have any offense at all, and they just keep winning while their entire team is hurt. Why? Because their starting pitchers don't lose them the game. It's that simple. Starting pitching is still the most important thing in the game, and the Angels don't have it.
Well, and another sponsor for tonight, Monkey Knife Fights, is another place where you can get your daily sports fantasy fix. Monkey Knife Fight is a daily fantasy sports gaming website for the casual sports fan that is simple, fun, and easy to play. Users determine which superstars compete in the day's professional sporting events and will record more or less than the contested line provided. Monkey Knife Fight's daily fantasy prop games play similar to the salary cap-based DFS games, but without the algorithms, lineups, and most importantly, the sharks. There are several contests to choose from, none of which require hours of research required on competing sites. Start with a simple 2x2 or go to the highest payouts 100 times and higher by selecting an 8x8 more or less contest. Get started now with a 100% instant match bonus of up to $50 with promo code FFSQC. And you're talking about watching a lot of Mets games. You've watched a lot of Angels games. Being a Cleveland fan, they've got Big Bopper Bobby Bradley back up. And it feels like Bobby Bradley is one of these guys that it felt like he was a hot name for a while because he did have that power potential, kind of along the lines of somebody like Pete Alonso if he maxed out on his total value. Is there any reason to believe in Bobby Bradley at all at this point?
Well, I definitely think there's reason to believe in him as a power hitting guy. He's got 10 homers and 120 plate appearances. Sure, maybe the league hasn't adjusted on him that well, but that's real power. And for a Cleveland offense that hasn't existed for, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years at this point, I'll gladly take that. Looking forward to Cleveland's 2021 offseason, I slot Bobby Bradley in as the guy who they kind of don't want to roll with, but will roll with if they went and had an optimal offseason like I think they can and go and spend and sign a guy like Chris Bryant. But, that's what I want as a Cleveland fan. In reality, they're going to continue to be cheap and continue to have the lowest payroll in the league like they have today. They're dead last. And so, yeah, Bobby Bradley's going to stick around and be adequate. He's going to be one of those rotational guys that I keep talking about, like we had Andrew Vaughn and Ryan Mountcastle this year. When he's hot, plug him in. When you see the Royals and the Tigers and the Twins are coming in for 9 games, go and make that ad. Let him play. See how he does for that week and a half. But long term, is he a guy who's going to sock one against Garrett Cole? Probably not. But is there value there? Yeah. And I do agree. He was a prospect for a long time as a high schooler, so he's kind of got a little bit of a stench on him, even though he's 25 right now. That's not exactly old at all. We've seen plenty of guys show up later, like Randy Arozarena, like Aaron Judge. So it's fine that he's just showing up now. Do I think he's going to be this world beater? No. But do I think he'll be a player in the MLB level? Yeah.
Jake Bauers was a guy that Cleveland was kind of looking for to be something at some point, and then they just cast him off. I don't really have any big fantasy expectations from him, but was there a reason that they kind of turned tail on him so fast? Did they just seen enough, or was there a reason why he ended up on a different team?
I mean, in my eyes, the reason they turned on him is he was doing horrible while Yandy Diaz was doing everything they wanted Jake Bauers to do when they traded Yandy Diaz for Jake Bauers. Bauers just looked overmatched. He looked like a middle infielder who couldn't hit, but he was playing first and left field. He just looked atrocious. There's no other way to say that. Certainly people put up bad numbers, and they put up bad numbers because they've gotten unlucky. That was not Jake Bauers in my visual representation of him. He has gone to Seattle, and he's been a little bit better, but this guy who was supposed to be an on-base machine has no eye. He's awful at getting on base. And when you're an on-base machine who can't get on base, you're a bad baseball player. And when you do that at first and left field, you're not going to be in baseball very long. I think Jake Bauers is one offseason away from having his last cup of coffee based on what the eye test showed me. Maybe he goes to a place like Toronto and they fix him. Or maybe the Brewers say, hey, you're the next left-handed first base reclamation project that I think I can fix. And maybe something does happen. But any sort of real expectations in a 12-man league, that's absurd to me. He's kind of in my dead and gone bin. And if he somehow gets hot and is hitting otherworldly, I'm going to wait very long before I buy him. And someone else in my league would buy first. He's out of sight, out of my mind.
Yeah. It's just, there are certain guys in MLB that just continue to catch for no apparent reason, and they just don't have the talent, it feels like, to solidify it. Like Joey Wendell is this guy who always catches on and always gets meaningful innings from a team every single year. And Joey Wendell is he's the R in WAR. He's the replacement level player. That's the best you can say about Joey Wendell.
Yeah, the way baseball economics work, and I'm surprised it's taken us 45 minutes to start talking about the economics of baseball, but, Joey Wendell's cheap. As soon as he hits arbitration, he's going to have to take a huge pay cut relative to what he should make in arbitration and, make $900K, then 1.4 mil, and then like 2.1 mil. Otherwise, he's going to get cut. He's going to get a minor league invitation to spring training, and if he doesn't hit, he's out of baseball. That's how the game works now. Once you start making money, you're not good. But before you start making money, you get ample amount of opportunities because you're so cheap, and you can get sent down and brought up left and right. So, yeah, Joey Wendell stinks. I agree. He's very much a guy who sometimes has a hot week here and there, and puts together a 2-homer week out of nowhere. And you're like, oh, maybe that's something, but it's not. He's just out there putting up stats and being replacement level. He's not being atrocious. He's not being cuttable by a team, but he's just there. And, every sport has guys who are just there. And especially in the middle infield, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier about guys that are young, and then we get caught up in, well, he's young and he can only get better. Two guys that are trying to trick me into getting them on my team right now are Chris Flexen and Logan Gilbert on the Seattle Mariners. And I know they're not going to get wins, but right now they're doing some things that make me take note every time I see them.
I recently invested in Chris Flexen in a quality start league, and I feel very happy with my investment. I'm all about him being Miles Mikolas light and just being very solid and quiet and unassuming and probably not good for very long. But short term, I'm all about it. Logan Gilbert's kind of the opposite. He's supposed to be this big up-and-coming superstar pitcher who long-term is going to be a star, but is only at that Chris Flexen level today. And I don't buy Logan Gilbert as this next unbelievable pitcher. I buy him as a quality major league starter, right, but I don't think that he's just going to go to this upper echelon. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong on a lot of things. But also, as this podcast has pointed out, I'm right on a lot of things too. So I think Logan Gilbert is somebody who, do I want to invest in him short term? Maybe, but I could see him blowing up. I could see a lot of variance with him. And he's kind of like that Toronto starter, Alex Manoah, if I'm pronouncing his name right.
He was another one I was going to ask about.
He looks good, and his stats look good, and things are looking good, but I don't have confidence in what he's looked like as a baseball player to be that good. So when the league gets their film, and they go and they make their adjustments and say, oh, we're going to sit on that slider, or we're going to sit on that cutter and do whatever we need to do, will that pitcher adjust? And with those guys, I think it's going to take some time to adjust. I'm not saying they can't. I'm not saying they're going to get sent down and disappear for forever, but I'm wary of that adjustment period and rostering those players during that adjustment period, just kind of sitting there. As a Luis Castillo owner, I was sitting there this year waiting for his adjustment period to end and for him to come back and be an actual starter. And it kind of has, and I'm pretty happy about that. But when you have a starter on your team and you don't want to start them, that's what we call a wasted roster spot. And with young starters, that happens. So I like to stay away from them in redrafts. In Dynasty, I'm all about them, but I'm buying Chris Flexen. I got no problem having Chris Flexen on my roster, and I got no problem cutting him when he has a bad start. If I don't like it, goodbye. With these young guys, there's a lot more wait and see. And wait and see doesn't fly with getting stats to win your league in 1 year. It's do something or don't.
Well, and as we kind of wrap up here, James, I've got a game for you, and I want you to do it without looking. Try to name me 3 players who could be in the outfield for the Atlanta Braves right now.
Ooh, could be or should be? Because could be, I'm going to say.
Either way.
I'll go Christian Pache, and he will not at all be a fantasy asset, but in the real world with his elite defense, he'll be totally acceptable. Then you've got Abraham Almonte, who I think is somehow still there. Am I right? Or am I mixing him up with another replacement?
He's there.
Oh, him and Guillermo Heredia, 2 former Mariners, guys who probably are also former Indians. I know Almonte is, but Heredia isn't, who are kind of being fine. I think Heredia is actually very adequate so far, and I think Almonte's been a totally fine 4th outfielder. Now, am I buying them to do anything in the second half? Absolutely not, no. But they haven't been horrible, so maybe. And then you got Drew Waters, who clearly the Braves don't think is ready. Otherwise, he would be up there right now.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe he gets a shot late in the season. Maybe they're playing the Arden game. Probably not. But yeah, without Ozuna, without Acuna, you've got those guys, and Ender and Ciarte still out there existing. But yeah, that outfield no longer is fantasy relevant.
Yeah, it's terrifying right now because Pache is down in AAA. Drew Waters seems to be stuck there too, and so you've just got fourth outfielders trying to fill in for guys who are supposed to be carrying this team. When you look at what Ozuna did last year, where he was probably a top 5 fantasy player, and at the same time, Acuna is Acuna, so he's maybe potentially the best player in the league.
Yeah, and when I look at the Braves, I see them kind of like I saw the Nationals last year. Things are not going their way. They're just not going to be good this year. Sucks as a Braves fan. I'm not one, but I know I wouldn't enjoy it. But it's just not your year. You've had all these injuries. You've had these off-field incidents. Even the guys who are healthy, like Freddie Freeman, are getting insanely unlucky. Your pitching staff's been fine except for Oscar Yanoa, and you know what happened with him. It's a thing where you just go, look, it's not our year, so you know what? Give me all of the bad lumps. Let me take all of the badness. Let's get a semi-decent draft pick and pretend that matters. And then also next year, let's have the opposite. Let's have none of these lumps. Let's be that team that just has everything go well, because this Braves team isn't destined to win. You don't win when you have Ender and Ciarte, Guillermo Heredia, and Abraham Almonte all at their peaks in your outfield, let alone at their current selves.
Yeah. Yanoa is a player that I wanted your take on because I had a chance to get him in a keeper league, and I know he's not going to play the rest of the year. I would just be carrying him the rest of the year. But it seemed to me like because he did something so ridiculously stupid in breaking his hand, punching, I can't even remember what, but because he did something so stupid, I didn't want to take him on because it feels like there's just going to be bad decision making on his part, like the rest of his career. Like you don't hear those kind of stories, and then you go, and then he turned it around after that. So I guess that's my thinking, is that once you do something that is that dumb, you just don't recover from something like that.
Everything you said is technically correct, but I would also say there's that gap period where he almost turns it around and then he doesn't. And you might get 2 or 3 years of very quality starts out of Huascar Yanoa before he eventually flames out. I turn to someone who he's kind of reminded me of, and it's not in the same light, but Yordano Ventura. I know his tragic end is not something I'm saying Huascar Yanoa would do. Don't take that out of context. But what I am saying is Yordano Ventura was supposed to be the superstar, instead was this very solid pitcher who people felt was just underperforming. But in reality, I don't think he ever was. I think he was being who he was supposed to be, which was a Jekyll and Hyde, very solid overall starter. And I think that's what Huascar Yanoa can be. I think he can be someone who's at that back end of that rotation, giving you some variance where you have some good and you have some bad. But if he puts up a season like Luis Castillo has this year, I would go, that's about right. And he might put up another season like he did this year, or 2 or 3. So I think holding him is smart. Also, I might be wrong, but I don't think he's guaranteed out for this year. I think he could come back. It's possible the Braves just shut him down because there's no point. But I think he does have some possible end season value, although it might be out of the bullpen where it's just icky, ugly innings you don't really care about. Yeah. But I think it's possible, so I'm optimistic on him. I like the Braves staff. They always find a way to find pitchers, even if it's for a short time. You got Julio Teheran. You got Tommy Hanson. You got Jair Jurgens. Those are all guys who we remember who had some elite peaks, even though they were very short, and I think it could be the same.
Yeah. Well, and last thing as we wrap up here, this is really uninteresting, probably to literally everybody, but the Detroit Tigers catchers right now have been doing some things where it's like, are these guys worth looking into? Because Jake Rogers and Eric Haas have really kind of turned it on here. And Haas, like, I think he had inside the park home run like a couple of weeks ago. And it, of course, that happens and it's a catcher, so something ridiculous happened. But at the same time, he's putting up good value. He's hitting the ball hard. And Jake Rogers is good when he's healthy.
When it comes to guys like that at catcher, there is some thought behind it. But in general, overall, my philosophy is if you got a guy who's performing pretty hot right now, you go, oh, they might not keep up what's going on today, but maybe they only fall off slightly. And then you look at their stats and their on-base percentage is about 300. I'd stay away. Get them away from me. I know it's catcher, but, Rogers has a 305 on-base percentage. Haas has a 292 on-base percentage. And they're performing kind of at their peak currently. So when they go bad, they're going to go real bad, and they're going to go so bad that the team doesn't want to play them. It's one of the reasons I stayed away from Adolis Garcia. I know he's an all-star, and he's the guy who's putting up numbers, and I'm wrong there, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think I'm right, and just the shoe hasn't fallen off yet. And when it does, I can go, well, I guess I missed out on a first half versus the first few weeks, but the 7 other Adolis Garcias who already fell off, I was right on. So it's okay I'm wrong on that. And in general, when you see a bad on-base percentage tied to a guy who's supposed to be playing good currently, I don't want any rest of season value there. I will avoid.
Yeah, I felt like the same way that you feel about Garcia, only I was on Max Kepler, where I traded Max Kepler. He had that big breakout, and I was just like, I'm doubling down. Max Kepler is not this good. And Max Kepler, over the rest of his career, has kind of been that guy who wasn't quite as good as he was during that breakout season.
Yeah, as someone who does this, and this will be my last send-off, every year I do one league where I get auto-drafted, and I try and keep it competitive. And I intentionally miss the draft, and I try to keep it as a low dollar value amount. And I like to challenge myself just to see what goes on with these players who I don't want and who I can flip. And one of those guys that I got drafted was Max Kepler. And I had him at the start of the year, and I tried to flip him preseason, kept trying to flip him. And ultimately, in a 12-team redraft, I cut him preseason. Couldn't get anything for him, tried to just get a starter, didn't like it, moved on, and I have no regrets. And yeah, exactly. Max Kepler's a guy who just hasn't had those on-base skills. He's been a little bit better than 300 throughout his career, but he had his one-off year, and it was a one-off year. Players do that. And yeah, you can just, in general, avoid people who have bad on-base percentages, and in general, that will be a successful strategy. Yes, you're going to miss out on some people. It's going to stink when you do, maybe, possibly. But overall, you're going to miss out on a lot of people who you also want to miss out on.
All right. Well, the second half of the season is going to be kicking off soon. We want to hear what you think. Make sure to tweet about our show or mention us in different places. We'll mention you on the show. If you mention the show here, we'll get your name out on air. So make sure that this second half, we're all doing our best to have an even better performance all around. So for me, Chris Steele, and James Vecchio, we're wishing you all the best of luck here in the second half of the season. All right, everybody, good night.